So, welcome back, students. In our last discussion, we did talk about a topic on public debt. That means we talk about the growth of public debt, how public debt in our country, India, did keep on mounting or did keep on increasing, and it did increase due to a variety of factors or due to a variety of reasons. And now let us talk about yes, if we talk about these public debt, that means we're talking about the borrowings, we're talking about the loans borrowed by the governments. Okay, so the question we need to ask ourselves, if the government have to borrow, or if the government need to borrow, from where does it borrow? Okay, and yes, talking about our government, actually the government do borrow from both internal as well as external sources. Unlike a private individual, whenever we talk about borrowings, we can borrow only internally. That means we can borrow from our friends, from our relatives, or from banks or financial institutions. Okay, whereas if we talk about a government, okay, a government, its sources are much wider. That means it can borrow both, be it internally or externally. Now let's have a look, what are the internal sources. Some of the internal sources of public debt are comprises of individuals and private organizations. Yes, the government do also borrow or ask for a loan from private individuals. Okay, sometimes if we talk about this point, that means whenever we say the government borrow from individuals or private individuals, it might be for two reasons. Okay, one is that a situation when the government is really in a financial crisis. That means when a situation, when a government is in such a situation that it do really need funds, that means the only resort it is to ask from its own people or to ask from its own citizen. Another situation why the government borrows, it's like it's for example, say to solve the inflationary pressure, the inflationary problem that prevail in a particular country or at a particular point of time. What we learn when, again, let's talk about this. What is this inflation? Inflation is a situation when the prices of different goods and commodities rises. Okay, why price rises? If we ask ourselves why price rises, is because there's too much demand. Okay, and again, why there is too much demand is because the money at my disposal or the money in my pockets is too much. I have huge amount of resources or money in my pockets, and therefore I want this, I want that, so many demands. Okay, so if the demand keep on increases, yes, it will push up the prices. And if the prices keep on increasing, yes, for the rich people it won't be a problem. But once price increases or once inflation sets in, it directly hits the poor people. Okay, so seeing, or under such a situation, what the government did, seeing that the purchasing power in the hands of certain groups of individual is too much, okay, it borrows from them. It's not that it need the money at that point, but it's just that to free our country from the inflationary problem or inflationary pressure. And under such a situation, the government do borrows from individuals or from its own citizens. Therefore, talking about the internal sources, one of the source it is that the government do borrows from individual and private organizations. And also, yes, besides individuals and private organization, the government also do borrows from financial institutions such as the provident fund, the insurance companies, the mutual funds, so on and so forth. These financial institutions do act as one of the important sources of public debt. So besides private individuals and financial institution, another sources that do play a very important part in providing or in lending to the government is the commercial banks. The commercial banks not only lend us with to a private individual us with a loan whenever we are in need of cash, but the commercial banks also do lend a helping hand to the government whenever it faces a financial crisis. And if we had gone through that particular note, it says borrowings from the commercial banks, it did increases the money supply in the economy and is likely to exert inflationary pressure in the economy. Once the government, one drawback whenever we talk about this particular source is whenever the government borrow from the commercial banks, it will raises the money supply in the country. That means the money supply or the hands in the hand in the money in the hands of the people will increases. And if that happens, it will result to inflationary pressure in the country or in the economy. But even then, yes, commercial banks do play a very important part in lending or in providing loans towards the government whenever it faces a financial crisis. And besides the commercial bank, we have the central bank. The central bank, one of the major function of the central bank, as we all know, it is referred to as the lender of the last resort to the government. Whenever the government has no choice, no alternative, okay, like to borrow, to ask from, be it from individuals or from other banks or from any other financial institutions, the last resort, it is from the central bank. The central bank do play a very important part besides uh, lending financial resources to the government. It is also responsible to manage the public debt on behalf of the government. So besides the commercial banks, the central bank or the RBI do play a major role, being the lender of the last resort in which the government can turn to in time of crisis. And also this RBI or the central bank, it is also responsible to manage the public debt on behalf of the government. So besides these internal sources, we also, that means the government also have external sources. That means the government can also borrows externally. Now let's have a look what are the external sources of the government. The external sources of the government comprises of foreign nationals and private organizations which is borrowed by the government by issuing its securities in the international financial market. Another, it is when we talk about the donor governments, that means certain developed nations of the world do provide uh, some loans or financial aid to the poor countries or developing nations to help them to carry on various developmental works or various developmental projects. Besides, another source we have the international financial institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, the IFC. These also do provide loans to the government to finance developmental projects, and at the same time it has been stated over there, and also to manage the balance of payments problems. And also the fourth sources is the funds of some countries and business or economic forums. Here the government may also borrow from the funds created by some countries and businesses or economic forums like the Saudi, Kuwaiti and OPEC funds. Another external sources, yes, we have some funds that are being raised by some countries or created by some countries, rich countries, say for example the OPEC countries, okay, and through from these funds that are being created by certain rich countries, it helped to provide funds to the government in helping in solving the various financial problems. So these are the sources of public debts of the government, which comprises of both internally as well as externally. So thank you.